primary purpose of Innovative AAC Solutions, the podcast, is to educate and inform. The views expressed during all episodes are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute educational or medical advice. They are not necessarily the views of Special School District of St. Louis County. Hey guys, welcome back to Innovative AAC Solutions. I'm your host, Lara Hayes, and we are diving into another episode all about literacy. I cannot wait for you guys to unpack this one with me. When we talked about doing a season on literacy, we really wanted to highlight some of our staff here in the district that were doing the most with literacy and supporting communication for our students with devices. And so one of the staff that we felt like we definitely needed to highlight is going to be our interviewee this week. Her name is Katie Murphy, and she is a center-based teacher in the Rockwood School District. And so I cannot wait for you guys to hear from her. She has so many gems and takeaways that we can learn from and really start to jump into and use in our classrooms immediately. But before we do that, I just wanted to jump into our literacy joke this week, and it's one of my personal favorites, although I do think I like all of these literacy jokes that I've discovered, so I'm hoping you're liking them too. But this one is why are the first four letters of the alphabet the hardest? Why are the first four letters of the alphabet the hardest? Because the rest are easy. E to Z. I hope I just get such a chuckle out of all of these jokes. I hope you're enjoying them too. Definitely consider banking some of them and using them with your students. I hope the fall is going well. I hope that you guys are learning a lot from this season, and we are just going to keep learning. We're going to keep diving in and exploring together. So we're going to jump into our interview now with Katie Murphy. Welcome back to Innovative AAC Solutions. I'm your host, Lara Hayes, and I am here with one of my favorite people. I'm going to do a soft introduction and let her tell you a little bit more about herself, but I just can't say enough how much I love working with her. She is a teacher for Special School District, and so without further ado, here's Katie Murphy.
Hi, the feeling is very mutual. I've adored working with you as well, Laura. So I'm Katie Murphy. I have been with Special School District for the past 15 years. I have been in the elementary setting and middle school setting, with middle school being my favorite place in the world. It is a very awkward time for everybody, so it really levels the playing field for everyone. So it's a really fun place. Let's see. I feel like most of my experience has been through Special School District, through trainings and resources that I've only heard of through them. So thanks for that, because often that's come from you guys and your team. But yeah, I've always been in a self-contained classroom. So I have always had students who use some augmentative, non-traditional way to communicate. And
you're like a unicorn, because most teachers do not like middle school.
Oh, I love it. It's like, it's almost like a reset, you know?
That's such a good way to phrase it.
Yeah, it's a really cool time. And because it's 3 years, I don't know if it's just like on my end a mindset, but I only have 3 years. I don't have kindergarten through fifth. I don't have freshman year through 21. I have 3 years to get as much done as I can. So it's kind of, like studying before the final, like you only have this much time. Like I have these 3 years to make as much progress as I can with a student. So I can't waste those moments. So I don't know if everybody thinks like that, but that's how I think.
No, it's such a good point. And you think about it, and some kids you're trying to catch up if they're like they have some splinter skills, but they're not quite where you want them to be. But then you're also still looking ahead, because it's the first time where you're sitting down going, okay, like what's our trajectory? Where are we going? What do we need? All those things. So you really do kind of have that middle ground of trying to do all the things and all the hats.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's a really, if anyone's ever considering moving to middle school but scared, because it does have a reputation of not being where people tend to think they want to work, it's totally worth it.
Oh, yes. So this season, we're talking all about literacy and AAC and how it kind of all intersects. And when I was thinking about people that do a really great job of that, your name came to my head because you do such a nice job of incorporating curricular supports as well as communication and all of the things with some of our recommendations, but also just on your own. So for a teacher or for someone who is like, well, what does that look like? What does it physically look like? What does it look like for planning? Can you describe a little bit what literacy looks like in your classroom, particularly for, as you mentioned, those students that have complex or creative communication needs?
Sure. It looks different every year based on my caseload and what the makeup of the room is and how each student communicates and what each student is interested in. Sometimes it can be a lot easier because you have a kid who loves X, Y, and Z. You can pull every book, every audiobook, every Google slide deck, all these things on these interests. And those are just where you can jump in and just start talking about all these things they love. And then you might have students who are more complex and don't give you a nod in any direction what they're interested in, and you really have to do that digging to find those interests. Or students who don't stop moving, and how do you move with them with the literacy physically, not like literally, not figuratively here. Like, how do you do literacy and move? How do you take it to the swing set? So I think it looks really different every year in my classroom based on the physical makeup of my room. But I always hit vocabulary first. I always, before we go into a unit, before we go into a book, even if somebody gets a book from the library, we flip through first and we look for those core words and find those on their devices. Or if somebody has a communication book that doesn't quite have that vocabulary yet, or doesn't have as much fringe vocabulary, just finding other ways to incorporate that vocab. I see the weather is changing. Yes, the weather is changing. Yes, you have yes, so just finding ways for them to interact with that book or with that literacy activity, whatever it may be.
One of the things I love that you said, just as a jumping off point too, is the fact that you said finding their interest. And sometimes I think that's a struggle for teams because they have curriculums that are like out of the box. Like we're thinking about ELSB and we've got Unique and we've got all these curricular supports that are out of the box. And so we bring them to our students and then they kind of fall flat. And I love that you said, well, first we have to find their interests, right? And if we don't know their interests, then how do we find their interests? And so that's your starting point, correct?
Yes. Absolutely. So I tried to highlight through and, flip through some old notes when I heard I was going to be doing this. So I sounded like I knew what I was talking about. And so many of these things I'm sure came from you or Cheryl or Julie or Shannon or someone else in the biz. But one of the things that I highlighted that was like, yes, this needs to be said again, was interest and intention drive attention. So if you want someone to pay attention, you've got to find that interest. You've got to find a way to get them to have intention to participate in that activity. So another thing I saw was that students focus on things from their experience and their knowledge of the activity. So it's those things that are so duh when you say it, but when you stop and look at how you're running your room, you can get almost like stuck in the box. Like you said, there's the activities out of the box. And so what took me a while was to figure out I can use those frameworks, but swap out what the topic is, I can do Hello Mo, but I can do it with Pinkalicious. I can do Oh My Apple Pie, but I can do it with There Wasn't a Lady Who Swallowed a Fly. You can use all those things that are in the box, which are research-based, which are, obviously they are effective. That's why it exists. That's why, our district uses these things as it's research-based, or we wouldn't be having them in our classroom. But I think people need to know they have the freedom to ad lib a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And the space to do that, right? We're not
Yes.
saying that we have to stick. We want you to go outside the box because that's what's going to make, like you said, the students successful. Because if your jam is Pinkalicious, you are way more likely to be intentional and have that attention and then want to talk about it afterwards and be engaged than if we're talking about Mo for the umpteenth time.
Mhm.
And frogs disgust us, right? Like
Right.
Mo would not be my jam. Like apple pie, a little
Right.
more my jam, but
Yeah.
not Mo.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So some you mentioned some curricular supports. What are some universal literacy and written expression, AT supports that you have found useful in the past?
My favorite thing I'm using right now is Clicker. I feel like through whether it's Clicker books or sentence sets or Clicker sets, there's so much in this program, and it can be picture supported. It can, not be pictures, but I feel like there's so much that can be done with that programming. So that's absolutely a favorite right now. Other things, I always have the visuals, the things, the universals that we're always told to have. But again, I think um, having that ability to ad lib and know that you can change what your visuals look like. I know finding time to do things is always a struggle in education, but those visuals and having them be student specific make such a difference. Again, interest based. So if the student does not see any words or any benefit to these visuals, like this visual does not get me the beanbag that I want. This visual does not get me a snack. This visual does not get me, a break or get you to go away from me. So making those visuals make sense for that student is always a huge game changer. Another thing I've loved is my students who use dynamic display voice output devices. I have it where it's set so that their specific vocab is also in my computer. So I can pull it up on the active board and I can use their same setup simultaneously while we're doing something. And I've seen huge, huge interest here because all the other students in the classroom are finally like, yes, I finally get to touch all these words and use all these boards. And, I know there's different theories of students' AUGCOM systems, and this is theirs. It's not a toy for anyone else to play on. But yet sometimes doing that playing gets them interested in their AUGCOM system. So again, it's situationally specific. But I've loved pulling it up on the board and having it be everybody's talking. And honestly, it's eye-opening too. I don't know where this is going to fit in, so I'll just say it here. If you try and get through one lesson using only the words that they have, I think it's really eye-opening of what we're trying or what we expect from them before that lesson and how we realize we have to adjust for them afterwards, when the only way you get to teach is using their words. It's very like, oh, okay, so, and just really is that aha moment and rethinking of what needs to be altered so that it's a functional, useful, desirable way to communicate.
Right, right. And like shifting that teaching method. We talk about the descriptive teaching method all the time from Gail Van Tatenhoof and how like we don't use words like volcano, but we could use words like big and hot and fire and those kinds of words that are way more frequently used in the English vocabulary vernacular to talk. And
Yeah.
but that's a shift, right? A lot of like teachers like, I don't even know where to start with that. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a great point in thinking about it. And the other point that I kind of hear you saying is like even with robust systems, vocabulary is limiting, which goes back to this whole idea of why we wanted to do this as a highlight for the series, the season, is that you have to start teaching the keyboard. You have to start teaching phonics. You have to start teaching, even with early emergent communicators, you have to start giving them that awareness, because to truly be autonomous, you have to have access to all 26 letters of the alphabet.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just have access to other people customizing and adding vocabulary words you might need. So what give the listeners some examples of how you might incorporate the actual like phonics or letters with some of your students, what would that look like?
Um,
Like, do you
we
start with
always,
their name,
well,
like the letters of
yeah.
their
So
name?
when
Yeah.
I start the year, I always start with the basics of a new school building, a new staff, or if it is a returning student, here are these, here are these parts of the school building. Here are these people that you know. We always do a building walk and look for anywhere that we can find words or numbers within the building. So are we looking at room numbers? Are we looking at exit signs? And using all those opportunities to find, okay, it starts with this. Let's see if we have it, let's see if we have it here. Is that a word that we would want to add? That's always a place that I start the school year, is exploring the building, and going into the whole, again, so much of it is, yeah, I do this. Yeah, I do this, but it's making it interesting. Like, yeah, we do functional signs, like, the survival signs, and again, get them out of the box, and here's these, and here's what we do. But what else can you do with those things? Where's that word going to be important to you? Okay, let's find that. What's that start with? Is that a match? A lot of, students, even in middle school that I work with, might not have letter recognition yet. So we're just looking to see, squiggly, squiggly, are they the same or different? Okay, it's got a cross. Are they the same or different? So really just looking at structures of letters and deciding if it's a match or not is a lot of times where we may start with letter recognition as well.
Yes, I love that. And I think that can be so helpful for someone who's new to trying to figure out how it all intersects. And, it's not just functional things, it's not functional learning, it's not just communication. Like, you have to find this balance of how you
Mhm.
fit it all together and find the way, what's their Oreo, what's their what's their
Mhm.
jam of how to pull them in to the topic. So how do you balance it all, Katie? Like, thinking about your classroom as a whole and then individual needs. Like, what if someone was just getting started, what do you think is the easiest way to jump in?
I think you need to go observe somewhere where it is working. I think that not it again, it's not a traditional classroom. It's not what we learn. Even, I went to college and went for special education, but I didn't touch any of this in any of my classes. And so to be expected to support a student in a way that you've never even seen be successful, is you're going to be battling uphill to try and figure out what the heck you're doing. So, it makes so much sense for our students to model and have them see what we'd like. Well, I think the same for us, that you've got to trust your resources, all your supports that say, hey, this classroom's doing great, you should check it out, and do it. Take the time and go see it working. Another way that my classroom runs effectively is everything is so routine based. It's the framework is extremely predictable, but the content that we're using within that framework is what's changing. So I think when they know what to expect, they're going to feel more confident in what they're doing. So if things are predictable, then that wait time can start to shrink, because they've done it for the past week, they've done it for the past month, not necessarily that exact same story, because again, we would lose interest. Well, some could listen to the same story every day, but for the idea of education and progressing through the year, that content's going to change. But to have a student who has seen how, okay, we're going to look at all the words first, let's find our words. Okay, we're going to listen to the story next and find our favorite page. Okay, we're going to talk about the pictures and describe those things. Now we're going to read the story, and now finally I'm going to ask some questions, because I don't want to ask a question and have blank stares and have them feel like they're not doing it right. Humans want to please. As human beings, we want to do it right. There's always fear of doing it wrong, because you're going to be outcasted from the tribe, because that's not right, that's not helpful. Like, it goes way back, right? We have like lizard brain. So like, people want to please. So setting a student up with a lesson where the first thing they do is not get it right, I think you're just putting up a wall. There's just a barrier to getting someone invested in that activity. But doing something that is predictable, that is comfortable, that is so routine, just is going to give them that opportunity. It's just knocking down that barrier, knocking down that wall of how they can interact in that lesson. So I think, sorry, that's a very roundabout way of getting to routines are so important. It's led to me being able to have students who are nonverbal, students who have limited verbal abilities, running our morning meeting, being able to go through all my slide deck and talk about, okay, what was yesterday? What's today? What's tomorrow? What's the month? Let's look at our planners. Who's passing out planners? And truly being a student-led activity because they've seen that routine all year. So I think in balancing it all, seeing it work somewhere is helpful, establishing that routine, but again, giving yourself the ability to ad lib. If you see a need for a change, make a change. I think a lot of times we wait for it to be just right. We wait for something to be perfect. And then a couple of years later, oh, if I had known this, then I would have done it this way. You're not going to find that out by waiting. You have to just start changing and making not necessarily mistakes, but just a longer path. Maybe it's not a direct path to that, end goal of what you're trying to achieve or make your classroom look like. And accept that it is going to flop sometimes, and it is okay to say, well, that was a wash. and you just adjust and you figure out what to do next time. But I think for someone just starting, it's as simple as just start. Don't wait. If you see something, that's something else, I think. So with a classroom like mine, you're typically working with a handful of adults, whether they're related service providers, whether they're the TAs, paraprofessionals. There are a lot of other adults, and there's a revolving door, and it's managing schedules and all of those moving pieces. And there's an assembly. And so this person has to go here on top of trying to ensure those routines are in place, trying to ensure everyone got to the restroom, got their snack, got medication, got out of their wheelchair to, get on a bench. And there's so many pieces that there are so many adults. And often that can be one of the trickiest parts as a new teacher is directing other adults in what to do. So a tip I would give there is that if you see something, and I'm talking, in this instance, we're talking about communication and literacy here. If you see something and you think, oh, that's not how I would have done it, or that's not what they said in the training, that's not the best way to do it, say it. Because the longer you wait to say it, the longer that adult's pattern is going to get set in place. So the more you will have to put in place to reverse that. There was one of those other great things in all these trainings that I go to, that when your hands are on a child, you're teaching them how to do something with your hands on them. So it's teaching the other adults and support staff in the room as well, those pieces that you learn. And I know that can be one of the challenging pieces is I went to this training, this was so awesome, but now it's like a silo. I'm the only one in the room that knows, backwards chaining, or knows that it's okay for them to hit the wrong word on their device. And I'm not going to say, no, not that one, because that's not what I would say to any of my other students. I would say, oh, I hear you. Okay, but what about, and using that, I think I'm on so many tangents right now.
I love all of them. I'm like, ooh, which one are we going to pick apart?
Right? Yeah. I think sometimes we don't give our students who use AugCom devices or alternative writing methods, we don't give them the room to make errors that we give more traditional students. And I think that is another aha moment that I hope more people hear and recognize, that my student can hit the wrong word 8 times. But guess what? He's hitting the word and trying to get my attention. And that's great. And so, you take it and you try and shape it. So I think it is okay for things to not be perfect. It is okay. We always do writing at the end of the day here. And again, it's very routine based, very structured. And there's times where I get pulled and the TAs take over, and they're able to run these lessons. And now they're seeing, it doesn't have to say, I see the lake. We can say, see lake wet. That's beautiful. That was amazing. You are so on topic. You said lake. Is lake your favorite part? That's a cool word to use a lot of, I think that we have to work with what the students are giving us and not do the, no, that's not what I wanted you to say. Well, that's not what education should be, is them saying what we want them to say. It should be teaching
Self-generative.
them to yes.
Yeah. There's so much power in that. Like you're instilling the power. And I heard you unpacking like the part of input. Like we jump to, okay, we have all these expectations and we want them to give us the answers and to, follow this set guideline of like, okay, I give you information and then you tell me, what it is, right? Sit and repeat and respond. And what's so powerful and like what I hear you saying is like, yeah, we're going to give them all this input. We're not expecting them to say stuff. We're not waiting. We're building that capacity for them to do that at the end. And then also the self-generative piece of like, it's okay. Doesn't have to be perfect, right? It doesn't have to be grammatically correct because we know that's part of learning and that's part of the learning process is to be self-generative in the sense that like, I'm going to say exactly what I want and then I'm going to get feedback and I'm going to get acknowledgement of like, that was a great sentence. Like we could tweak it a little bit, but like now I'm able to give the teaching feedback that they need.
Yes.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. And a huge piece of that too, when, okay, maybe should we tweak the sentence, is letting them hear their own work back, whether you're reading it back, whether a peer reads it back, whether the generated voice output through the computer reads it back, hearing that sentence back and saying, okay, is there anything you want to change? And I've seen more growth in proper sentence structure this year using Clicker when we hit it and we play it and it's I went to the track and field meet. Oh, that sounded a little weird. And, I have one student in mind in particular, and she's going back and taking out those extra words so that it is a more fluent sentence. So,
and she has a writing
really
sample.
Cool.
She has her own writing sample. And I couldn't think back on another student we supported together, and he had a writing notebook and he had cut up strips and he was manipulating those sentences. And then we had that generative on his device and we had a screenshot of that. And like that was his writing sample. And I remember how proud he was of that. And
that was amazing. And yeah, again, it's thinking out of that box. Oh my gosh, that was such a fun student. Yes, like taking those interests and back to where we started, it can be hard to find interest. So use the family, talk to the family, have them send as many pictures as they are willing to send. And if all you talk about that year is that student's pictures, then that's what you talk about that year. And I could do a whole science lesson right now based on your background and a picture of you. We could talk about the season. We could talk about oxygen and leaves. You know what I mean? So there's so many ways to pull your content, and I'm supposed to hit these content shouldn't be in quotes, sorry, your content and your standards. There's so many ways that you can still reach those things by using a personalized approach through that student. And yeah, he would generate these sentences and then I'd print it out and we'd physically cut it up like old school cut and paste, because that was best for him. I think too, we get tunnel vision of it has to be typed, it has to be on this, it has, and it doesn't. It has to be what works for that student. And truly what worked for him was physically cutting apart a sentence, and he built his sentence and put it back together. And at the end of the year, he had this notebook just chock full of his pictures and things that he said about them. Yeah, that was really cool.
All the good stuff. I know. I think we get our heads wrapped around the technology piece and we're like, oh, this is going to fix everything. And sometimes it does, but light tech supports are great too, right? Thinking about how are they scribbling? What does their writing symbol look like? What is their independent reading look like? How are they manipulating letters? Are we pulling in sensory letters? Like what are all those things and how can we incorporate them so that they're self-generative and have some independence? And I know you guys do a really great job of that in your classroom. The one other thing I was going to add, if someone's listening and going, I can't get the release time, I can't go observe someone in a classroom, Project Core has some really great modules and example videos that you can go to, and you'll get learning credit for it. And, even if you just go on YouTube, if you don't care about the learning credit, you're like, I just want to see what descriptive teaching looks like. Put it in YouTube. You'll see group lessons. That's a big pitfall for a lot of teachers is like, I don't know how to do this in a group. They're all at different levels. How do we do this? So I think even if you can't get out, it would be best to see it in person, right? So you can be asking someone that's wonderful like you, Katie, of like, okay, well, what would you do here? How would you do this? If that's not an option, the next best thing would be to go and watch some of those videos. So at least you can get a feel for what these incorporating these interests and shifting and making it your own can kind of look like. Is there anything else that you would add?
Yeah, I think going off of that, find what you as a teacher like, because if you like it, then how much more likely are you going to be to incorporate it into your lessons? You know, if there, you can get lost in all the resources. There are so, and thank goodness we live in a world and a time where there are now a plethora of resources for children who learn like this and communicate like this. But you can get lost because there are so many. So I think find what you like. Again, a student's growth is going to accelerate when your growth as a teacher accelerates, and your growth is going to accelerate if you're doing something that again, we want to feel good as humans. We want to feel like we're doing it right. And if you find whatever method that you're like, yes, okay, I'm rocking this. This works. Use it. Use that. And don't feel that, okay, but they did show us these resources too. And there's, I checked out these things from the IRC and I haven't touched them yet. Give yourself some room to feel successful in something and find that for you, because when you're invested, when you're interested, obviously other people in the room are going to vibe off of that, and it's going to increase their interest and increase their growth as well.
Oh, I love that so much. Yes. 100%. Any other challenges? We've talked about quite a few in trying to balance everything. Any other challenges you would say you've seen that you're working on overcoming?
Sure. I think a lot of times going back to, well, this is what the sentence is supposed to sound like, is we forget that children are not adults. And again, letting them sound like themselves versus what we say they should sound like. So I think that's a huge adult education mindset that is a challenge to shift. And again, you're the ringleader, mastering the schedule, making sure all these people know how to support this student. It's making sure that mindset transfers to all these other people as well, so that it's not just when they're in the classroom from here to here with me, it's also when they're in PE or when they're on the track, that we're honoring the things they say. I think you have to acknowledge communication. You have to, you can't brush over it. We get these windows and you have to take them. We don't have the luxury of saying like, no, like let me hold your device. Come on, we're doing this. It's not going to work. So I think a huge challenge is getting the buy-in from everyone of the end product. Making it around the track is not, maybe in PT, but not the goal for me. Or, the parts of a plant. I don't need them to know petal, root, stem. It's cool. I love science. It's so cool. But what I need is everything in between. What I want, I should say, is everything in between, of finding, okay, which part is long? Which should we do first? Oh, I see the glue stick over there. And waiting and letting things naturally happen. I think our gut is to do and do and just fix it, make it better. Here's how we can be done faster, and just letting things be and kind of play out, allowing that child to initiate which direction it's going to go. So I think one of the biggest challenges is mindset, and getting everyone on board that the end product isn't the goal. It's all the steps that we took to get there. And I think lumped into that as well as the things, I was about to say simple things, but it's not simple because it's very confusing for some people, is that the tools aren't the activity. The what we're clicking, the computer itself, whatever, the switch, hit the switch. I'm thinking of language development. And when someone learns to speak, we don't say, okay, put your tongue behind your teeth, put your tongue behind your teeth. You don't say that to someone who's learning to speak. I mean, again, unless you're in speech, but I think it's getting that buy-in.
And if I can kind of paraphrase, I'm hearing you say things like the cognitive load for the staff like reflects their mindset, right? So like if they're so focused on the activity or the tool and wanting to do it quote unquote right, then they lose that social connection piece of the content that really we're trying to gather from that. And so
Absolutely.
maybe more so we're trying to really, like you mentioned earlier, hone in on a few tools that you really feel like you're like, we feel confident. I feel confident in making sure everybody knows the purpose behind this so that now we don't have to focus on the tool. The tool is just there. It's part of
Mhm.
our activity, it's part of our day, whether it be the smartboard or clicker or the AAC device. And so then we can focus on the content, which is the language, which is what is our goal, and being clear on, okay, our goal for this activity is not root, pedal, stem. Our goal for this activity is to teach long because we want them to have that vocabulary when they're an adult and need to say, it's been a long day. I need
Right,
something,
right.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Shoot, I just had a fleeting thought and I lost it. Oh, that's okay.
But again, I think part of managing like adult mindset too is just really difficult, like you mentioned, Katie, just the challenges of that and
Oh,
and helping them. Yeah.
you triggered it. I think you saying earlier, I can't find the time to go see this. Finding the time to meet regularly as a team to discuss each student is near impossible. So I think every time you go to a training or every time you have a thought or see something and, oh, that's perfect for this student, have a running Google Doc and have the whole team on it. And that's where that's where you can put in support at the elbow. Please don't hand over hand to the device. Those types of things, that's a specific example from my classroom this year is I kept seeing it and kept thinking like, I thought I said that. Okay. I thought I said, there's so many people. I did say it to someone, but someone was out of the room when I said it. So getting it all in this document and then boom, the next day I saw at the elbow instead of guiding the finger, but just helping get that forearm up. So I think it's a little more work on the back end, but compiling those key points that make the difference, those things that I said, if it makes you pause of like, oh, that's not quite how I would like it done. And again, as a new teacher or an experienced teacher, just as people, it can feel awkward to correct others sometimes. I think making it non-confrontational and putting in a doc of like, all right, keys for the classroom this week, this month, this year, that's a great way to get all those thoughts and push it out to a wider group of people.
I was thinking the same thing as you were talking. I'm like, yeah, just non-confrontational styles of supporting each other and teaming, because then it doesn't feel like you're dictating, right? It feels like everybody's
Mhm.
bringing value to the table. Everyone knows they're important, and it builds this culture in the classroom of just community and like social connection amongst the staff and the students. And that is something that always resonates with me in your classroom, and that is difficult to teach, but I think it's such a key point when we're thinking of challenges and how much is going on and balancing it all. So I'm glad you said that because it was exactly what I
Yeah,
was thinking. I was like, yeah, we
nice.
just have to be non-confrontational and know that we're just building up each other so that we can all be the best versions of ourselves for our students. So, okay, I mean, this is such a big topic, and like you have so many examples, and I really do feel like we could talk about it all day. But if there was one moment, one snapshot of your favorite AAC moment to date, if it has literacy, great. But if not, will you just share that with our listeners or just a couple, you know?
Sure. The most recent one is from this school year. We had a substitute SRO come in while our SRO had to be out for something. And one of my students just built this friendship with him. And he would come in and he would do his wheelies and spin around and just get so excited. Like his whole body would just shake with excitement. And they built this friendship. Well, that SRO was a sub. So he eventually did go back to whatever, lots of important things that police officers do that was not in our school. And we were doing a letter writing unit. And so he wanted to write a letter to the SRO. And so we used his device. And again, because I have his personalized device uploaded to my computer, I was able to mirror exactly his words on my computer, print it out and mail it. And he just received a letter back this week from the officer, and he just said how much it meant to him, and that no one's ever sent him a letter like that. And it was just so cool. He was so complimentary of like, I see how much harder you have to work to send your letters or to get through the halls, and I respect that so much. And he like cut off a patch from one of his uniforms and sent it to him. He said that's a huge sign of respect in their field. I know, it was so cool. And it's because he wrote a letter using his words. It wasn't me typing or me writing. It was his picture supported text, which was really cool. Another thing with the letter writing this year is I applied for a PTO grant to get a little vacuum to work on life skills. And I had the students write letters to the PTO saying thank you. And they were very honest letters. Hate it, loud. Like it was their letters, but there was thank you, don't like it. But they, and it was 7-8 letters that went to PTO, and they pulled me aside later, the principal, and just said it took up a huge chunk of PTO time was just looking at these letters and reading these letters. So I think big successes, in my opinion, are when the communication and the writing gets outside of our world, when the people outside of us see it and see because we know what they're capable of. That's why we come and do what we do every day. And it's not that other people don't think they can, it's that they don't know yet how much they can do. And so those have been some really, really cool successes.
I gotta brush off the goosebumps because that's exactly like my takeaway is just it goes beyond the classroom walls, right? When you add literacy and writing, you add value not just within the classroom, not just for your students, but you add it for the world, right? You add it to the community. Think of that butterfly effect for that resource officer and like the rest of his interactions with someone with complex communication, right? Think about his shift in mindset. Think about the PTO board and how much that impacted them. They took and saw the value of reading every single letter, and so powerful. So finding ways to do that, finding ways to go outside the walls. Oh, we're just gonna land there. Like we're landing the plane right there because that's the takeaway. That's the big picture, is that it's more than just us. It's more than the classroom. It's more than letters on a board. The one thing I was going to add, if most of our editing softwares are free, so as Katie has mentioned a few times in this episode, if you need support in downloading those to your computer, it does it's Mac or PC specific. So if you have questions or you're like, I really want to do that, I had no idea, reach out to your facilitator. We can definitely walk you through that and we can support you in that. Because I mean, every teacher I've heard who's done that, Katie, has said it doesn't just help the students with the device, it helps every single student in the classroom because it's a graphic organizer of language. So definitely check that out. But thank you for coming on today. Thanks
for having me.
Oh, it's been so great.
Sorry, I really feel like
you covered everything
everywhere with it. So.
You covered everything, and I think everyone's gonna find so many just little gems and takeaways. And if they have a few other questions or they want to reach out to you, what's the best way to do that?
SSD email. So kbmurphy@ssdmo.org. KB is in boy. Murphy.
Perfect. Okay, so on behalf of Innovative AAC Solutions, I'm Laura Hayes with Katie Murphy. We just want to thank you and get out there, do some literacy and writing.
Awesome. Thanks so much and good luck.